Welcome back to the Papa Schro Knows podcast. I got a loaded podcast for you today. EDJ is joining the show. We're talking baseball, football, kind of go all over the spectrum in football, talking quarterbacks, places to play, a little bit of the Rooney Rule as well, coaching decisions, all kinds of good stuff about the NFL. Talking Cardinals and Royals baseball as well. And with that being said, I'm going to pretty much get right into it. Make sure you smash that subscribe button if you're enjoying the content. Hit the like button if you enjoy the episode. And without further ado, let's get into this conversation between me and EDJ about everything baseball and football related. EDJ, welcome back to the podcast. And after another couple of weeks I feel like the Royals still been playing pretty good until they met the buzzsaw of the St. Louis Cardinals over the weekend, which I'm not going to act like my team is just the best, but it was a good weekend for us. I feel like both teams have been really hot. I was actually pretty excited for the series once I realized it was happening this weekend. I don't think until like Thursday I realized that was who the Cardinals are playing this weekend. So I think two teams that are very hot. The Cardinals might be one of the best or the hottest teams in baseball right now. So what's your take on this weekend series?
Well, I got tired of listening to the Cardinals fans all weekend, so I buzzsaw was a trigger word there. I had to hold myself back for a second, but I think the Royals are kind of lukewarm at the moment. They're kind of dealing with some injuries, Lugo and Rangis. Perez doesn't seem 100%, even though he played first base today and did fine.
He did make a really nice play in the ninth inning. Perez over there at first.
He did, and I was surprised to see that because he's not young. He's 35 and he's been playing catcher his whole career. So, that's 39 basically. So, that offense is just so frustrating. They're getting hits, they're just not translating into runs. They can get 8-9 hits a game, but it's not translating to anything. So, but when you have pitching that's so good, only allows 1 or 2 runs a game, other than once in a blue moon, it's more frustrating to see them lose games 2-1, 3-2, when they just can't push over 4 runs in a game. It's just not happening. And I saw Quintero try to change the update with starting Blanco in center field, who ended up getting the game-tying RBI in the 7th over Isbell today. And Mark Canha, who's 36, 37, and he's playing like a 29-year-old. Watching Mark Canha play, he's been one of the best hitters on the team all year. I think he's hitting sub 400 right now. I mean, he doesn't play very much, but he's still in the 400 for a replacement player who plays every 3 or 4 days. Kevin Biggio's got to go down. And I liked the idea of having Kevin Biggio because he can play second, third, left, center. He can play it all, but it's not working for him. He's got to find his rhythm in AAA. Pasquantino's having a hard time. And it Perez is too, but Vinny's trying to crush the ball every time he's up to the plate, and we're not even getting a run over. So what are you crushing the ball for? There's a lot of frustration with the Royals, but they're 4 games over 500, but they're in 4th place. The Twins have won like 29 in a row. I'd say the Twins are probably the hottest team in baseball right now.
Yeah,
they won 13 in a row and gave up. And I think 34 scoreless innings. Like, good lord. So I mean, the Twins are nuclear at the moment. I think they just lost today, but it's now become the toughest division in baseball. It was getting there, but I think it definitely has now. You got 4 teams over 500, 4 potential playoff teams, 3 potential dangerous playoff teams, and 1 disruptor. So I mean, the Royals have an uphill battle. I think they can get there, but they just got to score runs. But the pitching is great. The Cameron, I always forget his last name, who started yesterday for the Royals, making his 2nd start ever, gave up 1 run. He's the only pitcher in MLB history to give up 1 run or fewer in 2 straight starts to start his career. So, I mean, he's got a big potential in that rotation now that Rangis and Lugo are both sitting out for the moment.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head where I think it's frustrating because you get the Royals who are, the offense is kind of leaving the pitching behind. And you saw it over the weekend. 1-0 game on Saturday. 2-1 game that the Royals do end up winning, because that was the Cardinals' problem last year. And I feel like they're kind of hit and miss this season. And the pitching maybe, I don't know, I would say about the same, maybe a little bit worse. Palante really hasn't been able to find his way for the Cardinals. He had a good outing Friday night. Michaelis, who also has struggled, he had a really good outing on Saturday. And today I didn't see who pitched, actually. I'll look at it real quick. Liberatore. Liberatore has had a great season so far, but I think for the Cardinals, this series is probably exactly what they wanted to see, where you don't have to use a ton of pitchers, and their offense, I guess, gets it done. They for sure got it done Friday night, but one run was good enough on Saturday. One run wasn't quite good enough on Sunday, but it's the same story for both teams, where it's like every time it feels like the hitting is leaving the pitching behind, whereas the Cardinals have gotten some decent production out of their bullpen. I think the starters have probably been a little bit better for the Cardinals, and for the Royals, these are those games that are going to be very tough to lose, and you're going to be counting them at the end of the year. How many times did we, lose a one-run game, or whatever it may be in whatever situation? But I think that's going to be tough for the Royals to overcome. It's something that I've heard, locally on the radio, them talk about multiple times, where, and I think we talked about it a couple weeks ago when we talked about the Royals, of just it's going to be hard to overcome such an abysmal offense when we get later in the season. So do you think that the Royals at some point become buyers in the trade market, or do you think they kind of just let this year flush itself out and move on and try to just improve naturally, rather than, I don't know if they're necessarily a World Series contender, to do that. And I think the Cardinals are in the same spot as the Royals. They had similar record last year, to where it's hard to become a buyer, but, there's that thought that, hey, maybe if we buy into, one or two offensive pieces, that this team could be a legit team.
Yeah, well, I mean, last year the Royals went out and got, a couple of random guys. They got Paul DeJong, who was a power guy who ended up hitting, I think, like 10 or 12 home runs for the Royals during his time there, short time there. Um, I think the Royals can get some pieces in place, but I don't know if one big bat is going to fix it.
Yeah.
I mean, Bobby's still hitting over 300. You have Michael Garcia, who's nearly at 300. Mark Canha, who's, I think, will play more now. I think Quintero's starting to see that he needs to play more. He's hitting well. Um, Freddie Fermin, even though he doesn't have a great average per se, he's very clutch. He's had a lot of clutch moments this year. I mean, he's been the most clutch player for the Royals, it seems, every time the game's on the line. There's just not a lot there. And it's like, I mean, I kind of repeat myself, but it is frustrating to watch that happen. But I don't know if they need a piece or not. They need a lot of outfield help. They need a whole new outfield. Hunter Renfroe, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. It's just not doing it. He's hitting 178, and I'm sure he's a great leader and a great, clubhouse guy, but hitting 178 and hitting fly balls every single time you're up to the bat, it's not necessarily they strike it out. He's just hitting the ball in the air. It's like, well, are you practicing your contact at all? Because it's just not there. So they just need a solid outfielder. I don't know who that would be. Obviously, I think a lot of teams are going to sell really quickly on the Rockies and White Sox. Maybe the Marlins or something like that. That Luis Roberts he'll probably go to a bigger team than the Royals or a divisional rival, but that would be an option that they could go out and get if the time was right and the price was right and stuff like that. There's a couple guys out there they should nab, but they just need outfield help, and I don't know what they're waiting for. Maybe they're waiting for Caglianone to come up in August or September or whatever it is, but he's definitely on that path. I think he can get there pretty early, but
Yeah, I just saw them post
maybe
today that he got moved up to AAA.
So, I mean, a lot of people were worried about his ability to get there in time and early, super early, and then talking about Bobby Wynn, how long it took him, and even though he's a superstar and is a superstar, it would take him forever and blah, 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 blah. He's already in AAA and it's in May. Late May. well, mid-May. But it's very obvious the Royals are very, 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 very high on him because you don't move somebody who's a first-round pick to AAA in the first full month of a season unless you're planning on using him in July. I mean, you've been a bigger baseball fan than I have forever. Don't you feel that's true? I would feel that's true.
I mean, yeah, and especially if they're looking for another bat, that they can bring up. And my only thought is, what do you do with Pasquantino?
Well,
I mean, I get he's not hitting
right
though,
field.
but
Yeah, they've been having him play right field,
okay,
and I think that may be the replacement for Hunter Renfroe.
I think
would
that makes
assume,
sense.
I think Pasquantino can figure it out because he kind of did this at the beginning of the year last year, and then he kind of got the ball wrong. But I think towards the middle of this year, he'll start to figure it out. I mean, you got to keep in mind the Royals are one of the streakiest teams in the league. The Leafs start out really hot, obviously. Go ahead.
Yeah. I was just gonna say it's kind of one of those things. I feel like kind of goes on a case by case basis because with the Cardinals, you've got right fielder and Jordan Walker that it feels like he just hasn't panned out. I feel like he needs more time to I don't know get to where he's going, if that makes sense. Because I think Jordan Walker's also 22 at this point, and you still got a very young, talented guy that's trying to make his way up to the bigs. Yeah, but with so Jordan Walker, I mean, I don't think it's panned out exactly how the Cardinals have wanted him to, but at the same time, that's why I kind of say it's a case by case basis. I feel like Jordan Walker kind of keeps on going up and down in between AAA and the bigs, and Caglianone, if you feel like he's ready for that, I think that you give him the push. Like you bring him up and you see what you got at least for a few weeks. Maybe a month and a half, 2 months to give him some time at the big league level. And if it doesn't pan out, I mean, we saw it last year with Jackson Holiday in Baltimore, and same thing with the Cardinals. Like I've said with Jordan Walker, that feels like since 2020. The Cardinal. Well, 2020 is when they drafted him. I want to say 2022, maybe 23. I can't remember. I think it's been 3 years now though, where he's had some big league time, work back and forth, and it just depends like if you can stick or not. Because you also have maybe that helps Pasquantino, heating his bat up a little bit, or there's dominoes that could fall with that. I think to having the possibility of Caglianone being able to produce at the big league level. But, I think see what you got at AAA for a couple of weeks, maybe get to July, like you said. And, if the bat is, working the same as I think off air, you told me he was hitting like 310 at AA. So if he's doing the same thing in Omaha that he was doing in Arkansas, I think that's an easy, maybe right after the All-Star break, bring him up, see what he's got for a few weeks. And, if it doesn't work out, send him back down by, I don't know, August. Give him another month in AAA, and then bring him back up in September when you get the September call-ups.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. You just have to be patient with these because, I mean, you don't want to push somebody so quickly that they just absolutely crash and burn. Like you said, Jordan Walker kind of seemed like that. Cardinals kind of toss him up there in the middle of nowhere, and a lot of people were calling him like a huge bust or something like that. But it's baseball. Baseball's hard to kind of distinguish bust between time. And I don't think people realize how hard the MLB is. It's literally one of the hardest sports in the world.
I mean, hitting the ball might be the hardest thing in sports to do. So yeah, I agree with you with Walker. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. And I think people, like we talked about, don't really realize that. But it just takes time. And that's what we talk about with teams too in the major leagues with wins and losses and streaks and hot streaks and super cold, super hot. That's the league. I mean, if you take a look at the league right now, not one of these teams that are front runners have not lost, multiple series in a row. It's happened to everybody. And the Dodgers were like 25-6 at some point, And now I think they have like 17 losses. And that's just the exaggeration. But they were super, super, super hot. And then they just kind of fell off. They're still in
You were
first.
actually right on
But,
point with that. The Dodgers are at 18 losses right now.
yeah. And look at the Yankees too. I mean, they were hot and they kind of cooled off. So everyone's kind of hit the cool point. It's mid-May, the mid-May cool off, we'll call it, because nobody. The only team that's hot right now outside the Twins is the Tigers.
Yeah.
And the Tigers are 31-16. Who saw that coming?
Yeah, that's
Other than
crazy.
Tigers fans, but.
That's the best record in the league right now.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit different than when we talked a
And
couple of weeks ago.
and take a look at where they were at last year, and they were dreadful.
Yeah.
So I mean, talk about a franchise who understood how to build a team up. And they knew, and maybe they didn't. They just struck lightning in a bottle. Who knows? But they understood that they had a franchise that was going to take a little bit of time to get the ball rolling, and they made it to the playoffs after getting super hot after All-Star break, and now they're 31-16 and the best record in baseball.
Yeah, and with MLB, I mean, like you said, it is a marathon. We are running a marathon here, and we are still in the very early stages. Like you said, we're mid-May. I mean, you still got June, July, August, and September to go. That is 4 months of the regular season after May is over. So I do agree. One more thing I wanted to say about, just the prospect talk we were having and with Caglianone is what I just don't like to see is basically what the Cardinals have done with Jordan Walker. If you're going to go for it, go for it. I feel like I hated how they brought him up, and he was the starter on opening day, and I do believe that was 2023, so it was a couple of years ago now, and then immediately sent him down. I think it was either the beginning of May or right at the end of April where he got sent down, spent most of the year at AAA, came back up in September. I don't like that. And I know teams do that here and there, and obviously you want team control with the player. Once you get that 6 years of service time, you can be out if you want to be out. And so teams try to manipulate that. But I do think that that's hindered Jordan Walker's progress in a big way. He's had his, ups and downs while he's been at the big league level, but you have to be there long enough to figure it out. How many superstars do we see go through slumps that last a month and a half, and then all of a sudden they're being thrown all over the batting order, and one day it's just like, boom, it clicks, and all of a sudden the guy's, hitting the cover off the ball. So, I think all of this kind of goes together of the fact that this is a marathon of a season, and I don't know if really any other sport has necessarily the type of season that baseball has, just when it comes to, like you said, the streaks. You get hot, you get cold, you just try to, wave off the cold spells as much as you can and do what you can, to get back hot, or at least kind of hover above water until you can get it clicking again. It's all, timing and, just all that stuff. You're going to the ballpark every single day, and it is a tough game, and it is a marathon of a season.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head on that one. And I think fans get frustrated quickly.
Yes.
I saw it today at the stadium from both sides. I mean, the Cardinals came in super hot, and I knew that was going to be a problem because the Royals were kind of limping a little bit. They, they had that stretch of 16 out of 20, and they were really rolling. And then they went to Houston and won the first game, and then had two competitive losses. And then they got spanked by Boston the series before that twice. So I could tell that there was going to be a problem heading into the series because when you have a really hot team and a team that's kind of limping along, you're either going to get ran over or you're going to salvage a win out of the 3-game series, which is what they did. But it's just, again, it's just baseball. And that's how it's going to be. And you can't get frustrated as a fan. And you just got to realize that we still have 5 months. So
Right.
There's a long way to go.
No, absolutely. And that's why, like, this series for me as a Cardinals fan, I felt very good about, because not only do you get the offense to come alive on Friday night, you get a really good game out of Miles Michaelis, who hasn't had a great season. You also get the, game-winning blow that is a solo home run from Jordan Walker. And then Sunday, I haven't really looked at the box score. I did watch about the last inning and a half. But the Cardinals did out-hit the Royals 12-9 in that game, and the Royals were able to bring it home and get the W. Let's see who started for the Royals. Michael Wacha. So the former Cardinal ends up doing enough to get, I don't know if he actually got the win, but did enough at least to help the Royals get a win. The Royals get a win over the Cardinals on Sunday.
Yeah, Walker looked great, and he's had a pretty good year for the Royals so far. But he looked really good. He had a lot of strikeouts in the game. He was making guys miss. Um, I don't know if he's been the most consistent starter this year. It's actually been Chris Bubich, who's been phenomenal. Um, but he did really, really well.
And with Bubich, it's funny because I feel like I've heard his name for so long around Kansas City that, he was kind of a guy that I don't know if like the Royals really thought was going to work out. And to see him starting to, really turn the page, I think is awesome to see. I feel like me personally anyways, I really root for those guys that come up as highly touted prospects and maybe they fall off a little bit. And like you said, bust is a very hard word to throw around in baseball because you never know when it's going to click for a guy. And I think Bubich is, a good, case of that. But with Waka, yeah, he's sub-3 ERA right now this season. That's awesome, especially in this day and age in baseball. And I mean, Waka's kept it pretty solid the last 3 or 4 years, right around 3.20, 3.30 ERA.
Yeah, I mean he's in those mid threes, low threes. I mean he's a great pitcher.
Yeah.
I mean you guys know that from him being over there for many years, but he can get the job done. But they need extra pieces, especially if Lugo and Rangis are going to be on the IL. I don't know for how long. I didn't read on that, but I didn't realize Rangis was only 28.
Okay.
I thought he was mid 30s or something like that. But so they have a lot of future in Cole Rangis, and he's a great pitcher. And he can. I think he led the league in strikeouts last year, pretty close, and he was leading a majority of the year this year. He's not anymore, but he's a great pitcher too.
Yeah, the Royals have definitely lucked up, and I feel you, like even just looking at the ERAs through all of the starters on the Kansas City Royals right now, it is kind of just inconsistent. You've got Seth Lugo at 302, Bubich at 166, Lorenzen at 376, Michael Walker at 296, and then you got Cole Reagans at 453 right now.
Yeah, his ERA hasn't been very good, and I think his injury that he had earlier in the year, and he got pulled out in the middle of the game. I think that's still nagging him. So I think that's what the Royals just decided to put him on the IL and let him rest up for a couple weeks, and hopefully he gets back to normal here before too long. But I like the Royals rotation. I mean, you kind of got to think Chris Bubich was the sixth guy last year.
Yeah.
He wasn't the starter. He wasn't a starter, but he was a phenomenal rotational bullpen guy. But if you're going to get a guy out of the bullpen who's pitching sub twos right now, and he's had plenty of long starts, that's deadly.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I completely agree with you on that. And Carlos Estevez, so it was the first time I got to see him pitch actually on Sunday afternoon. I watched him close the game out. Did anything come of that? For some reason, the trainer popped out there for a minute. I wasn't listening to the audio while I was watching it, so I had no idea what was going on.
He said at the game that he woke up not feeling well or something like that. And I guess Perez noticed something he was doing because Perez was playing first base today, for those that didn't watch.
Yeah, because it was Perez that ran over there first that kind of stopped everything.
Yeah, and here's my thing with Estevez. He gives up so many big hits in moments that he just shouldn't. I mean, today he left a guy on second.
Yeah.
And it's a one-run game. And he does that a lot. And usually it's with two runners on. So, I mean, it's gonna catch up to him at some point, and it's going to get ugly.
I can tell you, as a Cardinals fan, I completely understand. Because Ryan Helsley does the exact same thing. And I'm a big Ryan Helsley guy. But watching him pitch is, it's the cardiac Cardinals, essentially, because you are on the edge of your seat. You never know where the ball is going to go. He might walk three guys and then strike out the next three and win a one-run game. But it is tough to watch, and I got that out of Estevez, too, today. just watching him. And Brendan Donovan got a double. He was able to mitigate anything else. But, then he was getting to the problematic part of the lineup. You had Arenado, Contreras as well. So there was, a little bit, there was some hope for me watching it as a Cardinals fan, thinking, okay, we might actually be able to pull the sweep off right here if, one more guy can just get
I
a
was
letter in.
holding, yeah, I was holding my breath and everything in between on that one because I saw Arenado and then Contreras. I was like, oh boy, here we go. But there's a lot of boos for Contreras for the Royals fans, and I think I missed something, and I'm sure you can know why or have an idea of why.
I'm not sure. That's interesting to me just because
But
it's not like
but
the only thing that I will say, and this is one thing that's fascinated me in all my time living in Kansas City as a Cardinals fan, the amount of Cubs fans in Kansas City blows my mind. I almost feel like, obviously St. Louis is close, and speaking from someone that grew up in the middle of Missouri, most of the state leans towards the Cardinals, right, and fandom, which may have changed around 2015 when the Royals won a World Series, but I think you just kind of get those spots there where the Royals are really good, and the Cardinals have not been great in the last 10 years or so. So maybe changed a little bit, especially with the Chiefs being the only team in Missouri. But to move to Kansas City at a young age and to see the amount of Cubs fans I have seen throughout my life in Kansas City blows my mind. So maybe that's where that comes from. Enough people are, Royals and Cubs fans because, he left the Cubs to come to the Cardinals. That would be my only guess.
yeah, that clicks with me now that you mentioned that. That is true. There are a lot of Cub fans here. I didn't think about that. That'll be an interesting series when they come here. I can't remember when they come here, but that'll be busy series too. And it was a great crowd series. I mean, there was tons of people, near sellouts the first two nights. They celebrated the '85 series and the '15 series, but all 3 days were great. But speaking of great, the Chiefs' schedule was released. I don't know what you consider great or not. 7 primetime games, technical primetime games, and then I'm sure they'll have about 3 or 4 games at 3:25 on CBS. So we're probably going to 12, 13 primetime games basically. So have your heart medication ready.
Yeah, that's no joke. And it's going to be definitely I don't know. I'm prepared for the most interesting season ever. And that is crazy saying that after coming off of last season because what a weird year it was for the Chiefs. I think it's funny just the discourse online, because obviously the Chiefs got the most primetime games. They're in the middle of a dynasty with the best player in football, and the best coach in football at the moment on their team, and maybe the most recognizable guy in football in Travis Kelce with, of course, Taylor Swift coming to the games and stuff. And I know that plays a big part in what a lot of people think, but what the numbers say and what fans say are two different things because this is the team everybody wants to watch, whether they say they do or not. The numbers don't lie. And that is the reason the Chiefs are in all of these primetime games because you're absolutely right. I think just looking at it right now, I see one noon game, 2 of them. So the Colts and Raiders are both noon games. You've got to kick off the year in Brazil, Chiefs at Chargers. I also saw something about that, which saying they're taking away a home game from the Chargers. They're not taking away a home game. That was a home game for the Chiefs anyways. That stadium is red every time the Chiefs go out there. The Eagles game is week 2. That's huge. That'll be the first regular season game that I'm able to attend this year, so I'm excited for that one. They go at New York against the Giants for a primetime game. One that's not a primetime game, but it is in the afternoon slot, is Ravens versus Chiefs. It's a 3:25 game. At Jacksonville is a primetime game as well. Primetime game against the Lions. I mentioned the Raiders. Then they face the Commanders in a primetime game. The Bills, which is another 3:25 game. I actually do kind of like having those more so like, AFC rivalry games with the Bills and the Ravens at a 3:25. I get, everybody probably wants to see them. But like you mentioned, the 3:25 game is almost like a primetime game because if you're not local to one of those West Coast teams, if a Chiefs-Bills game is on, the rest of America is seeing that outside of, maybe you get a Broncos-Raiders game where it's like just that spot in the mountains and desert is seeing, their home teams play, whereas everybody else is seeing Chiefs-Bills. You get the Broncos November 16th in a 3:25 game. Then you get the second noon game of the year, November 23rd. That's against the Colts. Cowboys on Thanksgiving, which, again, basically a primetime game. I don't know if they actually consider that a primetime game or not, but it'll be the only game on at that point. Texans at Chiefs December 7th, another primetime game. Chargers at Chiefs, which is a 12 o'clock game. Chiefs at Titans, also a 12 o'clock game. Then you get a primetime game to round it out. Broncos at Chiefs, and then TBD for the final game of the year, which I assume it seems like they play on Saturday every year the last week of the season.
I would assume, yeah. Thanksgiving and Christmas, come on. Can we just let my holidays be 1 year so I can enjoy it without having to either be super annoyed or stressed out that even though we won, it was by a field goal with 5 seconds left. Just can we leave my holidays alone? But oh well, it is what it is. It's just so weird to complain about things, because there's a picture of us when we were kids, and I think it was the Rams Chiefs preseason game back when they did that. And if you would have told those kids that we're going to complain about 10 primetime games after trying to go for their third straight Super Bowl, they would have thought you were crazy. So
absolutely,
it's difficult, but it's enjoyable. That Commanders game is going to be fantastic.
Yes.
I'm very excited for that. Nervous, but I'm excited for that. Ravens, I'm not scared of them anymore. I mean, you just can't be. I mean, they're going to be competitive. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying, at what point do you sit there and really think, boy, I sure hope the Ravens don't beat us? It's not happening. The Bills will probably beat us in the regular season again. Let's be real, they usually do, but it doesn't matter. And I'm not trying to be a dick about it, but it doesn't matter. That's just what they do, and it seems to be happening every year. And I don't know if the Bills fans get excited about that or not. Put that. I'll have you be a Bills fan for a second. Would you get excited about beating the team that always beats you in the postseason, in the regular season every year, or would you just find that more frustrating?
At this point, absolutely more frustrating. I mean, I would get it the first couple of years, but at this point, I mean, 2020 was the first time the Bills and Chiefs met in the postseason, in that AFC Championship game with, these players involved, right? And so now we're going on 5 years that the Bills have consistently beat the Chiefs in the regular season, home or away for the most part. But in January, it doesn't matter. They consistently lose. It's been how many years in a row now? At least 2 years in a row now, I think, that the Chiefs have sent the Bills home. Then you had the Bengals, the one off year that the Chiefs didn't do it. You had the 13-second game, which, after that game, I think I would have been just annoyed as a fan if I was a Bills fan of this regular season game is cool, but it doesn't matter until we beat this team in January. And I think, for the Ravens at this point, it's probably about the same thing where, and I agree with you. I don't think there's a team in the AFC that honestly worries me when it really comes down to it. I mean, yeah, maybe one or two of these teams gets the Chiefs in the regular season, but when it comes down to the postseason, I 100% believe that this team is going to be that much better than the other team, or just be able to figure it out, Right now, I think that even with the Super Bowl, that was a self-inflicted problem. And self-inflicted, I mean, I know it's injuries and things like that, but I don't think the Chiefs have taken the offensive line seriously per se, or as seriously as they should have in the last since the Bucs Super Bowl, because obviously they turn around things how they wanted to do it. They got Trey Smith. They went out. They got Joe Tooney. They also drafted Creed Humphrey, or they drafted Creed and Trey Smith in that draft. Then they went out and got Orlando Brown, which was like what's that stuff called? Flex Seal. That's what that reminded me of. That's some Flex Seal for you right there. It worked until it didn't work. And really, Jet McKinnon deserves all the credit in the world for that, because if he wasn't in the backfield chipping for Orlando Brown, I think probably the same thing happens maybe even in the first Super Bowl against the Eagles with Orlando Brown out there.
Chip and McKinnon, yeah. I mean, you're right about Orlando Brown Jr. And we're not hating on him because he's a Bengal now, but just watching him play and watching his film in the postseason, you do more film study than I do. But you watch his footwork back then, it was sloppy.
Yeah.
He'd slip. How are you slipping? You're 6'8", 340 pounds, and you're slipping on the field who's someone who's probably given up 80 to 60 pounds less than you, because it's an end, it's not a D tackle, so they're going to be smaller. It was just so frustrating to watch because he was supposed to be, like his dad and this big star, and he wasn't that. And he was a flex seal. Yeah, you nailed it on the head. The flexi tape. He did his job.
Yeah.
But for what he wanted and the money he wanted and the length of contract he wanted, he's just not that.
Yeah,
and that's okay.
And the fact that he went to Cincinnati for less money, and I thought that was funny when that happened, just because you had Bengals fans all over the internet. Oh, he went here for less, and it's like, yeah, I get, and good to be excited because he is a solid left tackle. I don't want to act like he was just the worst left tackle ever. He filled a void. He was that flex tape that we needed for that moment. But we also knew, like you said, he wasn't the superstar that it kind of came across to be originally, like, oh, this is our left tackle of the future, right? And I feel like even for me, making content is like, I've said that it feels like 3 or 4 years in a row. Oh, this is the left tackle of the future. Oh, wait, this is the left tackle of the future. Oh, hold on, just kidding. This is the left tackle of the future. But with Jawaan Taylor, I do feel that is more justified at this point. They gave him too much money, probably, and he has not played great. But I will say, when it matters, that man is a Chief through and through, because when it matters, he is on point in the playoffs.
I was just going to say, you ready to hear something really annoying? I've started to like him.
Right?
He's cleaned up his penalties quite a bit. I mean, it's still not great, but they're way less than they were when he first started. And I'm not going to put the blame on him in the Super Bowl. It was all on the left, and the left side just got killed all game, and in the middle. But I can't put the Super Bowl on Jawaan Taylor. I thought he did fine. In the AFC Championship game, he played fantastic.
Yeah.
So I think Jawaan Taylor has learned Andy's system enough to where he can be a decent right tackle. Now, we're not going to move to the left, and thank God I think Andy's not going to do that. But for a right tackle, that's fine with me.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems to be doing his job.
Essentially, you have an overpaid right tackle, because the thought was when he came in, maybe he'll play left tackle, right? And so at that point, it was like, oh, we got a cheap left tackle. Well, no, we just got an overpaid right tackle instead. I do think that's why right now is a pretty bright spot that the Chiefs are in. And I don't think that they are taking it as much of a, at least how they were treating it before. Like, we'll figure it out is how I feel like they've treated it. And now it's like, okay, we have to figure it out. Not we will figure it out. It's we have to figure it out. You go out and you get Jalen Moore. You go out and you draft Josh Simmons. I do like both of them. And I think with Josh Simmons, or not Josh Simmons, but Jalen Moore, I did a film breakdown of him a few weeks ago. And I felt like what I saw on tape was solid. Wasn't great, but there's still some development to be had there. And I mean, for everybody saying he's a backup, he was a backup for the best left tackle in the league. So, and he put decent work on film last year. So, and not to mention, some of it was going up straight up against Chris Jones. There were like 2 or 3 plays I had in my film breakdown where he was one-on-one with Chris Jones on the outside. So I think that, again, maybe another flex tape kind of guy, bam, smack it on, stops leaking at least. And that's what you need right now. But if, he's able to be there while Josh Simmons develops into the star left tackle, this is exactly what the Chiefs needed. And if that's the case, boy, we haven't even heard the beginning of the talk from the rest of the league and their fan bases about whatever they're going to say next, whether it's refs, black magic, whatever it may be, because you might see another three-peat start right out, right back after failing on this one. And not to mention, I have joked about this, that, the first time the Chiefs were going back-to-back, it was run it back, right? They get all the way back to the Super Bowl, they lose. What'd they do immediately after that? Well, not immediately. They lost in the AFC Championship game the following year, but they ended up going back-to-back right after that. So, I don't know, man. Patrick Mahomes is a petty soul that when he gets out there, he likes to do the counting on his hands for how many teams passed him up. What was it, the year where Lamar Jackson was ranked ahead of him in the top 100, and he counted on his fingers that night after beating him as well. I do think that Patrick Mahomes could lead this team to a three-peat just out of spite for everybody, joking about, the three-peat gone wrong or whatever. But either way, the Chiefs are in the driver's seat in the NFL still, if you ask me.
Well, most of that I think is from Bills fans in general, and if we remember right, the Bills lost 4 straight Super Bowls. So I don't know what you really want to talk about when you talk about winning or streaks. I don't really want to hear it from Buffalo Bills fan. That's neither here nor there. Sorry, that I got a little annoyed on that one. But
Understandable.
how do you lose 4 straight Super Bowls? I don't understand, and that's even more impressive than winning 3 in a row. And
I
it's not
almost
like
feel you, because how prolific of a number 2 team do you have to be to go to 4 straight and lose them all? Because what it was, they lost against Dallas and San Francisco.
They had, yeah, and those are some of the best teams of all time. But you had really good teams all 4 years. They were built the right way. You had Jim Kelly, you had a bunch of different guys. But you still lost every single year. So, criticisms, blah, blah, blah. But
how scary do you think it is to Bills fans right now? What are we, 6-7 years into Josh Allen's career, that we're seeing it happen again?
I don't know. I feel like they kind of have like a new generation of fan in a way.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that losing in the Super Bowls kind of affected their parents. It didn't really affect them. So I kind of think Josh Allen is like their savior in a way. They sure act like it. And in a way he is, I suppose. And Josh Allen's a freak. We're not going to, talk about how untalented Josh Allen is, because that's just not true. But, to Josh Allen, I feel like if he were anywhere else, he could have won a Super Bowl by now. I think McDermott holds them back a lot. We talked about this after the AFC Championship game, but his play calling is atrocious when it matters. His time management is horrendous when it matters. His ideas of, okay, they're doing this, so let's do that. That would be more frustrating to me, because Andy used to do it to us all the time.
Yeah. He is a true Andy Reid disciple before Andy kind of turned it on like the last 10 years-ish, maybe.
Yeah, and Andy used to do it to us all the time. And that was Andy's MO his whole career.
Was it the New England in the playoffs where just like they let almost a minute run off the clock, no timeout called, and then all of a sudden it was like, oh, wait, we got to call a timeout. Like, I'm pretty sure that was a New England playoff game.
It was, yeah. And we almost won that game, I think, if I remember right.
Yeah.
You're talking about Smith and Hunt? Yeah.
Yeah, the clock management was just terrible.
Okay, no, I think it was Smith and Charles, I think. I can't remember. One of the two. Yeah. But yeah, they almost won that game, but that was Andy's MO for a long time. So we understand. We've been there, as a fan base, and it's fun to stand at the top of the mountain and point and laugh at other people. It's fun to do, but what we were talking about, how frustrating it is to be Bills fans, something like that.
Yeah.
It's very frustrating, and it's frustrating for any standpoint, and we've dealt with frustration until our mid-20s. So I feel bad for you. Oh, boo-hoo, you have a star quarterback who just can't get over the hump. Boo-hoo. Try having Tyler Thigpen and Brody Croyle and Damian Heward as your quarterback for 10 fucking years, and then talk to me about boo-hoo, because we have Josh Allen, who's a freak of nature. Boo-hoo. Oh, shut up. Go sit down somewhere. God. Anyway, what else is there to talk about other than those people who just can't get over the fact that they have a star quarterback?
Okay, let's stay on the same topic, because I am interested in your take on who's the most frustrated right now. Would you be more frustrated if you're a Bills, Ravens, or Bengals fan?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the Bengals fans are delusional. And I don't mean that to start shit. But they got there once, right? They beat the team. They beat us one time. And that's all they've done.
Yeah.
You know, and yes, they've done more than the Ravens and the Bills against us in the postseason. They have. They're correct. But it's not like y'all are way ahead of the Ravens and Bills.
I mean, they missed the playoffs the last 2 years.
Time. Yeah, you beat us in overtime one time in the postseason, and you'll act like you're on the level with us and, you know, everybody else, you know, the Eagles. You're just not. You're not.
And I do think that it's very revisionist history with Joe Burrow, because it's not like Joe Burrow went out and won that game. The Chiefs did absolutely nothing in the second half. You know, they went for a touchdown at the end of the half, messed up. You know, whoever you want to blame on that one, whether it's Reed, Bieniemy, Mahomes, or Hill on that play. From being there, that sucked the life out of the stadium. And I don't know why or what it was, but it just felt like even in the crowd, like we couldn't get it back that whole second half. And it was like they just kind of chipped away at the lead until, you know, they finally got one. I don't know. I think it was a short pass to Jamar Chase maybe for a touchdown that ended up leading them to the Super Bowl. But I feel like a little bit of revisionist history, because everybody acts like, you know, Burrow was the guy that really like led them there. And I mean, it was really the defense in that game, and maybe, dare I say, Joe Mixon that did more to really bring the Bengals back in that game than anybody else on the field.
Well, if you keep in mind, I think Mixon fumbled in that game and they didn't call it. If you remember right,
I think you might be right.
Mixon clearly fumbles in that game, but they didn't call it. And, you know, whatever. We get calls like that all the time. So, you know, I'm not saying one way or the other. But
you don't want to blame the refs?
Yeah, Mixon had well,
it's not a conspiracy?
I was going to, but then, yeah, well,
right.
No, that only happens when you're wearing red. But, you know, Mixon, I forgot about that. Mixon did have a hell of a game that game. Mm-hmm. You know, and that was when our run defense was really bad.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't great, and they exposed that pretty good. Trying to think what else there was, you know, but who's more frustrated? It has to be the Bills. I mean, it just has to be. I mean, with the Ravens, well, maybe it's the Ravens. I would say they're probably tied. You know, I feel like the Ravens. Yeah, I feel like the Ravens feel like they're better than the Bills. They might be. You know, they could be. I think they have a little bit of a better system than the Bills. I think the Bills just kind of say, you know, throw Josh Allen out there and let him do freaky magic for 4 quarters, and it usually works. I think with the Ravens, they have a really good defense always, you know, and if you look back at the AFC Championship game, if MVS doesn't make that catch, the Ravens might have a chance.
Yeah.
You know, and if that ball doesn't get punched out of Flowers' hands in the end zone, it's a different game.
Yeah.
It's a completely different game.
Yeah.
And one the Chiefs might lose. You know, so if we're talking about other than the 13-second game, the Ravens honestly have been the team outside of the Bengals who gave us the closest loss, or, you know, the biggest shot of losing. So I think the Ravens fans are just a little bit more frustrated because of the fact that Lamar gets MVPs, but he doesn't win the big games.
Well, and
but
not
it's
to
the same
mention
thing with
even just
Josh.
this last season with their loss to Buffalo, that was
Right.
really kind of tragically dropped by Mark Andrews. And I know that talk about the turnovers in the first half that Lamar had, but he did battle that adversity, come back, and led them to a spot where I legitimately thought the Ravens were going to win that game when it came to that down to that last drive. They go for that 2-point conversion to tie the game up. Mark Andrews drops the ball. So I could see where I would say kind of the Ravens may be a little bit more, a Ravens fan a little bit more frustrated. Although then you factor in not winning a championship, and, well, have the Bills ever won a championship? I guess I don't think so. They're 0 for 4 in Super Bowls.
Maybe ones in the pre-era. I
Right.
can't remember. So I mean,
So
I'm sure
I
somebody will
think
correct me on
having that there, because I will say, sitting on the other side of 3 Super Bowls in how many ever years it's been now, 6 years or something like that, and being to watching the Chiefs go to 5, I can say wholeheartedly watching the Eagles stomp the Chiefs in the Super Bowl was not that bad in comparison to what I've seen. Like, obviously it sucked, but, I got over it. Now, if we're talking about the Chiefs that hadn't won a Super Bowl, I might have
Yeah.
lost my mind. After that Patriots game, like,
Mhm.
I was a whirlwind of anger for a week after D Ford got called offsides. So I do feel like maybe that alleviates a little bit with the Ravens, although, like you said, the Lamar era hasn't produced a championship, but they've seen it in the last 20 years, or I guess now last 25 years they've seen 2. So, but I do think it's also, like you said, it's frustrating watching with Lamar Jackson, because I think, me personally, I think he's the clear-cut second best quarterback in the league behind Mahomes. And I think that leads to an interesting conversation of just between those 4 when you talk about Mahomes, Burrow, Lamar Jackson, and Josh Allen, because you've got Josh Allen, I think, really proved a lot last year. Although I don't think
Yeah,
that he
he
was
did.
deserving of the MVP. I do think he proved a lot because he didn't have a star receiver. He did have a really good running back, one of the best in the league. They won me a fantasy championship. Shout out James Cook. And so I do think that he had some weapons, but not necessarily to throw to as much. Lamar's dealt with that his whole career. Lamar has not had a wide receiver 1 in his career at all. He's had Mark Andrews. That's it. He's not had a number 1 receiver, like the way we look at, top flight receivers, right, in the league. Lamar has never had that. Meanwhile, Burrow threw for how many yards he threw for? 4,000, 4,500, somewhere in there. I think he threw for the most out of everybody. But yet, he's throwing to a 10-foot wide hoop. You got T. Higgins and Jamar Chase. And to me, Joe Burrow's really the only one that kind of looks funny in the conversation, because we've seen all 3 quarterbacks outside of Burrow, when we're talking about Mahomes, Allen, and Jackson now, that have gotten it done with not a lot of talent around them. I mean, Patrick Mahomes won a freaking Super Bowl with MVS, Juju Smith-Schuster, Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney. Saying that right now out loud sounds insane. I mean, we believed in them, the years they were here, but now, like, retrospectively, after what we watched MVS go through, what we watched Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney all go through, that's insane that Patrick Mahomes was able to pull that off with them. So I think we need to see Josh Allen continue it, and obviously calm down the turnovers this last season. But, I mean, he's turned the ball over more than any other player in the league since he's entered it. So that's what holds back Josh Allen from and makes Lamar Jackson, in my mind, the clear-cut number 2 over Allen. But I think Joe Burrow looks a little funny in the light.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's a point a lot of people bring up is, Joe Burrow has some of the best receivers in the past 10 years. I mean, T. Higgins would have he got paid the money in Cincinnati, but anyone would have paid him that,
And to be their
to
number
come play
1.
for them and
Yeah.
to be their number 1. And he deserved to be number 1, and I think he will be someday, and if not, very soon. Jamar Chase is a superstar. We're not going to sit here and say he's not. That'd be delusional of us. He's a superstar. But, I here's my thing. I feel like Burrow does deserve some credit because I think he definitely does do a good job of running that system. And, he does have that killer mentality that not a lot, and I think that may separate him from Allen and Burrow. I'll say that, or Allen and Jackson. Um, he just has that killer mentality that seemed to escape Jackson and Allen. Allen seems to have it sometimes, but Jackson just never seems to have it. And we saw it in the AFC Championship game against us. We saw it in the divisional round against the Bills. When it comes down to it, and I know he drove him down the field against the Bills and blah, 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 blah. But that's a throw of a lifetime for him. And Mark Andrews dropped it, sure. But you kind of also got to know Mark Andrews does that. Mark Andrews drops the ball in big situations.
Yeah.
So I understand he may have been wide open, but you're the biggest dual threat in the NFL, dude. Take your chance. If you don't make it, you don't make it, but at least you tried. And I'm not saying it was a cop-out, but in those situations, I feel like Burrow, Mahomes, and maybe Allen make the right move. I just think that's going to plague Lamar for a lot of his career. I know he's got MVPs and da-da-da-da, but it just seems like he makes a mistake when it matters the most and the other guys don't.
I think with Jackson, he does not do a great job when he is down. I think that, you talking about the killer instinct, I think that Jackson does a great job when he's ahead. And, you get onto a drive that, okay, we're going to knock them out with this drive. It's the middle of the third quarter, and we're up by 20 points. If we, score a touchdown here, this game's pretty much over. I think Lamar's your guy in that moment. But, yeah, down 3, down 7 late in the fourth quarter, it does seem like Jackson has had some trouble with the pressure. And Allen, I will say, yeah, sometimes he has that, and I'll give that to Burrow, too, that he does have it. Although my other problem with Burrow that came from being at that game against the Chiefs last year was I don't think that Burrow's a leader. I don't think that after that game because Jamar Chase, in the middle of his temper tantrum that he threw, not once did Burrow even try to remotely go over and stop it. So you watched your, top receiver throw a temper tantrum to the point that you got a 15-yard penalty, pretty much killed them in that game at that point, because that was late in the game that happened. And, Jamar Chase has been getting locked up all day long. He got away with an offensive pass interference early in the game where he tore Duffy down by his collar, and they called it a defensive pass interference, which is still one of the craziest plays I've ever seen personally, but that was just a blatant offensive pass interference that they called the other way. So it's not like he wasn't getting away with it. He just was getting locked up by McDuffie. McDuffie's got his number. And Snead pretty much had his number before that. Only person that didn't was Travarius Ward. And, man, I still feel bad for that man after that game, that they put him in single coverage all day long for that man to absolutely wreck the Chiefs' defense in that first, game where we saw Burrow versus Mahomes. So, now I forgot where I was even going with that. But, that he didn't go out and, stop him from, incurring that penalty. A leader would do that. Mahomes would go out there and pull his receiver off the field with his own hands. If Tyreek Hill was out there, if Kelsey was out there in that same situation. And I assume that I think Lamar has kind of got it a little bit more this last year. And Allen, I won't really speak on that just because I haven't really seen him in those kind of situations to really say. But to me, out of all four of those guys, Burrow's not a leader.
That's a good point. I didn't really think about that about Burrow when it comes to just being a leader. I think you see it with Lamar. I think you see it in Baltimore. They have, that toughness that the Ravens have always had. You talk about the leaders, Ray Lewis being the leader of the Ravens and just having that nasty defense with a lot of grit and toughness to it. And I think Lamar fits that mold. I think the Ravens fit that mold in general. It's funny because you don't look at Harbaugh and go, that's a guy with a lot of toughness and grit. But, I think he's definitely harnessed the Ravens. That's the Raven motto. Just be gritty and be tough.
They almost remind me of kind of almost like what the Bill Cowher Steelers were. When we were kids and the Steelers, I almost feel like the Ravens are almost like a successor to that, although I mean, I feel like the Steelers kind of try to keep that, going, but now without a franchise quarterback and them just kind of trying to figure it out, it's like that's kind of what the Ravens have become. And I think it almost started
Right.
with when they were really battling back in the day with Ben Roethlisberger versus Joe Flacco, and we still had Ray Lewis, Ed Reed around, and those kind of guys. But you're right, absolutely right. The Ravens have cultivated that culture of just toughness, and they're coming to the field to beat you up, not just to win.
Yeah, they do. But I think we kind of touched on this a little bit a second ago. But Lamar is the quarterback who just seems a couple plays away from having a different story. I mean, it was the beginning of the year last year. It's the first game of the year, but likely he's a toe away from making it one of the biggest games of Lamar's career. So I mean, he's almost there. It's kind of with Josh Allen and up in Buffalo. He's almost there. Burrow's been there, but it's just a different kind of leader in Joe Burrow, and a lot of people have accused him of just not being a very good leader. I think he has a different attitude. He kind of has, I'm trying to think of it a second ago, he kind of has the LA attitude, I'm just going to kind of sit back and let things happen. Kind of has the Roger-esque attitude of, I'm just going to do me, and if my team is my team, then so be it. But Burrow does kind of remind me of Rodgers. A lot of talent, can definitely rip your throat out. But I don't want to say he cares more about himself because I don't think that's true.
He's too
But
cool.
he's putting on more of a show than the other guys are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the whole moniker, like the Joe Cool, like he's just too cool to be bothered, man. He's too cool to be bothered by his receiver throwing a temper tantrum and ruining the game for his team on the other side of the field. He's just gonna hang out and wait for the huddle because he's Joe Cool, man. He's just gonna stay cool always. That's kind of how I see it at this point.
Well, Joe
after
Cool,
that game.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, I mean, last time Joe Cool came to Arrowhead and in the playoffs, he looked like Joe Scared because, I mean, he was obviously that noise affected him
Yeah.
very deeply. You could tell. And I think that was for the first time in his career that people were like, well, that's interesting.
I think I have hearing
You
damage
saw
from
it.
that game.
Yeah. And I think and the Bengals kind of talked themselves into that.
Yes.
And I think they found it funny, that we beat you one time and blah 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 blah. But the Bengals talked themselves into that. And I don't think people realize when people say Arrowhead is such an advantage, Joe Burrow learned it that night.
Yes.
And you could tell very quickly, and you saw it with Josh Allen too, in the Bills game this year. He was shaky, he was nervous, and that's not a typical Josh Allen thing.
No, that first drive, yeah, he was absolutely shaky and nervous,
Mm-hmm.
and I do think that you're right. I think that people kind of play it off like it isn't as big of an advantage as it truly is. But I mean, let me tell you, that game, and we had a couple comments. We had the Burrowhead comment. We had Joe Burrow saying, well, I mean, I played in SEC stadiums. It can't get louder than an SEC stadium. I will never forget that game going to that. That's probably like top 3 to 5-ish like loudest moments I've ever heard in that stadium. I remember going to the bathroom, and if you're familiar, you went to any type of sporting event, you know what I'm talking about. When you go to the bathroom, the radio broadcast is playing overhead, right? I go in there and like I get fully in the bathroom and realize I can't really hear the radio broadcast. That's how loud it is, one. But two, because if you've ever been to a rock concert, you also know this, is I couldn't, like, my hearing was off because that's how loud it was in that stadium, that I legitimately, like, my hearing was not on point. Felt like I was underwater almost or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, you're obviously as soon as you take it over, you've been to the playoffs, and I've been to the playoffs a couple of times, but it's times 1,000.
Yeah.
And that's the Midwestern intensity we're talking about, and the Kansas City heart that we have. I don't think people understand is that when it's playoff time, good luck. I mean, it's truly a different level. It's a different energy, and obviously it's a different energy everywhere. But when you take the energy of Arrowhead that is already there, and you multiply it with playoffs, it's almost kind of mythical. It seems just bewildering that a place can have that much energy. It honestly is kind of scary It's when you're standing there, it almost scares you in a way to where like, where am I? Where am I right now? It's very weird. It's very odd. It's cool, but it's very odd.
No, I agree. You're feeding into the people right now that say that Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs are doing the black magic. That's how they're getting by. You're feeding the narrative.
Well, satanically, they pay the refs too. So, I'm not really worried about
Right.
what's going to happen. And Patrick and Travis's new restaurant is just to help Roger and aid his, hunger for human flesh as sacrifices. But, that's neither here nor there. Um, I guess we're kind of going off the deep end. I think.
No, we definitely are, and I love it. I think this has been a great conversation.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of something to wrap this up with. If we'll do 4 opponents, 2 that you feel like are going to be the most competitive, and 2 other than the Jaguars and Giants that you think will just be so easy that it's almost impossible for us to drop those.
Okay, there's 2 easy ones to go with, the Titans and the Colts. I'll say the Cowboys on Thanksgiving Day. By then, George Pickens will be thoroughly ingrained. I'm sure some kind of controversy will come out of that at some point. So I'm going to throw the Cowboys in there. Sorry, Cowboys fans. Because honestly, I'm not really like a huge Cowboys hater like most people are. I get it. I get why they get the hate. Like, I don't know. I mean, they're just the Cowboys, whatever, is how I think about it. So I don't want to pile on top of all of that. I'll go with another kind of controversial, maybe touchy one. First home game of the year. The Philadelphia Eagles coming into Kansas City. I think that one is going to be one that obviously is marked on the calendars for everybody. And not only did the Chiefs obviously lose the Super Bowl in a terrible fashion, but the year after the Chiefs beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl, the Chiefs came to Arrowhead on Monday Night Football. The Chiefs had an easy win, and MVS dropped the ball over the top wide open. I think that between both of those games, that's probably eaten at Mahomes, might be eaten at the entire team. And I think that the Chiefs, not saying that they're going to blow them out or it's just going to be a super easy game, but to be a lot easier than what it's expected, right, is kind of what I'm putting my money on. To say the most competitive, I'll say Baltimore, and I'll say Denver both times. I think that Denver is going to start to become a problem. I think last year showed us that. I'm high on Bo Nix. I like Bo Nix. I'd hate to admit that, but I do like Bo Nix. There was the moment I became a fan of Bo Nix last year was somebody after a game asked him a question and said something to the effect of, where did you go wrong in throwing this interception? And he said, well, I threw it to the other team. I thought, I like this kid, because, hey, that's the most true answer I've ever heard a quarterback give. I threw the ball to the other team. But I do think with Sean Payton, I think that he's got his guy. They went out and got some help at running back. They got another corner. And if you don't think that is a direct influence of the Kansas City Chiefs, them going out and getting another corner when they have arguably, maybe the best corner in the game, but definitely a top 3 corner in Patrick Surtain the second. You know who's in their division. So that's what I'll say.
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about the Broncos like that until you brought those points out. Surtain, I think, leads Mahomes' career in the most interceptions by a corner.
By a corner, because it's definitely Simmons that has the most, which was also an ex-Bronco.
Simmons, that's right. Yeah,
he's a safety.
Simmons,
So.
Simmons and Surtain, I think, have the most off of Mahomes.
That's because that damn Vic Fangio. I can't stand Vic Fangio.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because Fangio was basically on the way out the door everywhere, and the Eagles brought him in.
He's a genius.
He magically somehow fixed the Eagles to be one of the best teams in football.
I don't understand kind of Fangio's whole. I mean, I get it. He wasn't, great as a head coach, but the Broncos always gave the Chiefs problems. And where did the Bucs get their strategy to stop the Chiefs in that Super Bowl? Vic Fangio. of the Broncos. Like,
Yeah.
Fangio
Yeah.
is literally the bane of Mahomes' career if you track it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the Broncos are going to be a problem. I don't know if it'll be their most competitive game. Well, I'll think on that one. But the two easiest ones for me, I think you're right. I think the Colts will be an easy one, but that's what we thought a couple years ago, and they beat us. But I don't know. I don't know about the Titans. I think I'll agree with you because I can't think of anyone else, and I blocked out the Jags and the Giants. So I think those will probably be the two easiest ones. I agree with you there. The
Other
most
than that, there's
competitive
really no
one,
other easy games on the schedule other than Titans,
yeah,
Colts,
no,
Giants,
hmm
Jags.
maybe the Raiders or something like that.
Maybe the Raiders.
Um, but I think two of the more competitive games, I think the Chargers will be one. I think the Chargers always like to be competitive, and I think that'll be a competitive game. And I really think the Commanders will come in here and give us a run for the money.
I
I
agree.
really do. I love what Dan Quinn is doing. I love what Cliff Kingsbury is doing offensively with them. Um, and you got to know Kingsbury is going to want to beat Patrick. He's just
Yeah,
going to want to. I mean,
absolutely.
and Patrick's going to want to beat him. So I think it'll be a competitive game. I think Jaden Daniels getting a lot of comparisons to Pat. Um, Jaden was phenomenal. I
He
mean,
was.
I can't think of one guy outside of Mahomes' first year that I can consider a much better start to a career. Just watching him play, and even in the playoffs, he just was not rattled at all, at all. Even when getting spanked, just kept playing, and it was wild to see. And I think was it they lost to the Eagles, correct?
Yeah, and they went to the NFC Championship game. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, at one point, the Commanders had a chance in that game.
Yeah.
Obviously, it didn't go their way, and they ended up getting, dog walked. But for a young team, and for Dan Quinn, a guy who, again, another guy who was basically told, maybe this isn't for you anymore. Maybe you should just kind of retire or whatever. And he did a great job with Dallas. That was after Atlanta. He goes to Dallas, becomes defense coordinator, builds a monster defense in Dallas. And then comes to Washington, and damn near goes to Super Bowl his first year with a rookie quarterback.
Yeah.
I know Kingsbury had a lot to do with that, but I think that Washington staff is super hungry because you have Kingsbury, who was head coach in Arizona, who got sent off, I think, kind of prematurely. Dan Quinn, who built that nasty defense in Dallas. Those are two former head coaches who are hungry and want to win and prove people wrong. And you've got a young team that you can do it with. I mean, the Commanders are on to something.
I agree. And I think they've been really close for a while, but they just haven't had the coaching, and I think they went out and they did a good job with the coaching to figure out. And I mean, even like the Eric Bieniemy move, that was so weird to me, and naming him like assistant head coach, and essentially kind of just told us all to our faces, like the league, we're not going to give him a head coaching job. I feel like that was kind of like what they were telling us with that assistant head coaching job. And what, he lasted 1 year with Ron Rivera, who was on his last leg already anyways. So definitely a weird transitional period for Washington the last couple of years. But I think you're right. They hit it right on the head with Jaden Daniels and going out and getting Cliff Kingsbury. His name's going to give me L too. And go out and get Cliff Kingsbury for their offense, Dan Quinn for the defense. And I do kind of feel you. I mean, they're two guys that want to prove everybody wrong. And with Cliff Kingsbury, I think you're right. Maybe they did fire him a little prematurely. But to go out and get, I can't think of his first name, but Gannon, to be their head coach, I think that we will prove in the coming years that was an absolute terrible move. And who's the other one? Shane Steichen in Indianapolis. Like, I don't understand why the league got so, I don't know, just so excited about Philly's staff that year that they lost to the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, because that was that year, and both their coordinators split for head coaching jobs.
Well, you have to think, the Eagles at one point were considering firing Sirianni.
Yeah.
in the last year. I mean, he went off on the Browns fans for beating them by 4. And the Eagles were bad
Yeah.
at that point.
Hey, they
And then
lost
they
to
went off
Baker
to
in the
rattle a bunch
playoffs.
of them. And lost to Baker in the playoffs the year before. So, I mean, Sirianni was on his way out the door. And Philadelphia has a short door, as Andy Reid knows himself. Yeah. But,
I mean, I was on this very
podcast
podcast talking about early in the season how the Eagles weren't even going to make the playoffs. So, and they turned around and won the Super Bowl. Yeah. I did not believe in them at all.
No, and it was very hard to believe in Sirianni. It was very hard at that point to believe in Sirianni, what he was doing with the Eagles. And who's to say it was all Sirianni? I think Vic Fangio was a huge, if not the reason the Eagles got to where they were.
And Kellen Moore.
And Kellen Moore, who, he went somewhere else now.
New Orleans. He's head coach in New Orleans.
New Orleans, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to think. That job sucks. I feel bad for him.
You're not wrong.
You lose Derek Carr, who now has to retire because of his injury. That's just a shitty job to get into. And Kellen Moore's a very talented offensive coordinator.
Yes.
And I think he has a lot of potential in this league, and that's just a rough first head coaching job. If he does anything with them, I think any of these, monumental franchises whose coaches are getting older will look at him in a couple of years, Steelers, Raiders, Seahawks, all these Patriots maybe. Well, they got variable. Do you like that variable? I mean, I don't understand why they didn't get him last year. Variable to me was a big mystery as to why he was sitting last year without a job, because he did a hell of a job at Tennessee.
Honestly, my honest opinion, and these are murky waters. The Rooney Rule. That's why. The Patriots hired a black head coach to be the fall guy to then go get Mike Vrabel, is what I honestly think. Although, Mike Vrabel's my dude. I like Mike Vrabel. I really liked him in Tennessee. The fact that Mike Vrabel took Ryan Tannehill to an AFC championship game is insane. The fact that they traded A.J. Brown from that team, the fact they fired Mike Vrabel, that is exactly why the Titans are where they are now.
Well, didn't they fire Vrabel? Well, maybe they weren't very good that year, but I feel like they weren't as bad as. I don't think it was a fireable offense, though. They just weren't very good. But I mean, I think Tennessee had to use their head there and realize, where the hell have we been before Vrabel? I mean, the last coach who had any, idea of, competency was Fisher, but even then he wasn't very good. I think Fisher is one of the only coaches to finish 500 or something like that, literally even pretty much.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was a head scratcher, but I do agree with you. I think there's a lot of that going on, and I think that's unfair to, black coordinators. I think a lot of that deals with, okay, we're going to go out and get this guy if we suck. Oh, we gave him a shot. It didn't work. Oh, shoot. And that's completely unfair. And I know that's what you were saying too. But, it's that's the unfairness of the NFL. And I think we almost saw that with Bowles, getting, the basically told, you're not good enough and all this and all that, and then having to go to Tampa and then got the head coaching job, after
Arians.
Thank you, Bruce Arians. The weird white guy, the weird white looking guy is what I was trying to think. I almost called him Wizenut, but that wasn't right. But yeah, Arians, and Arians, you would watch him coach, and it's like, I think Tom's coaching your team, dog. And you would just kind of watch him sometimes. It's like, are you even calling? Are you even talking? You just kind of stand there. It's kind of like the Mike McCarthy effect. It's like, are you really even coaching right now, or are you just kind of standing there? So, and Todd Bowles kind of got a bad shit, but I mean, he's doing a good job. He's doing a great job with Tampa. I mean, obviously, who knows what Baker and will happen and all that, but I mean, if he doesn't deserve another job somewhere else, if someone else leaves or somewhere, I don't know why he wouldn't. And he's definitely shown he's a great coach.
We're still talking Todd Bowles?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I've always been kind of a Todd Bowles fan. He's a great defensive mind, and, it is one of those things. It's just unfortunate because it's like I hope Aaron Glenn gets a fair shake in New York, although that's another just absolutely terrible job that I was kind of disappointed he even took in the first place. Because I like Aaron Glenn, and it's getting scary starting to see all these guys that like, oh hey, I remember when you played, now entering the ranks as head coaches and stuff. So showing our ages a little bit, but some of these guys like even like an Antoine Randall that's still on that staff, I do believe, in Detroit. But
I think he just moved to Chicago.
Okay, that would make sense to go with Ben Johnson.
I think he went with Ben Johnson. Yeah.
Yeah. Which makes sense. I do feel like when it comes to the head coaching, and it's like it's always one of those things where it's like, were you not good as a head coach, or did you go to a place like a Jets or a Saints where they're at this year and not get a fair shake? And it's case by case, I think, when you really analyze it. But I do think, like with the Patriots and Jared Mayo, I think it was 100% just we're going to put him in here as a scapegoat. And I don't think that any coach should just get 1 year, especially if you're in the middle of a rebuild. Like, with a rookie quarterback, and you're going to get fired if you're Jared Mayo, not making it work year one. Nobody was going to make that work. Hell, Bill Belichick was just there the year before, and it wasn't working. So, like, what are we saying right now, Well, EDJ, I think that we have been really around the sports world, or at least our world of sports, essentially, here in this episode. I really appreciate you joining. I think this might be the longest Papa Schro Knows podcast of all time at this point, which is great. I've enjoyed the conversation. Always enjoy when you stop by, so thanks for being here.
Yeah, man, it's always fun to talk to you and kind of, go over everything. I think we went over literally almost everything but sports history at this point. It reminds me of the good old days of Schrobanks and all that fun stuff. I heard Ray talking in the background before we started everything. We got to do a reunion. I know people were asking for it. By that, I mean the four of us, but whatever. That's neither here nor there. But it's always good to talk to you, buddy, and we'll talk again soon.
If you are still here at this point in the podcast, I greatly appreciate it, because this is the longest episode of Papa Schro Knows podcast that I have put out, at least I'm pretty sure, to date. And me and EDJ just got talking, and one thing leads to another when you start talking sports, and you could be sitting here all day talking, right? So I do appreciate if you're still here. Make sure you hit that subscribe button for me. Really trying to build a community, just talk some Chiefs football in general, and just sports for that matter. I've had a whole host of things I want to talk about MMA-wise. I may be back later in the week with another podcast just to kind of talk MMA, basically. Hit that like button for me, too, if you enjoyed the content. And like EDJ said, check out that Schrobanks show. I got the Schrobanks stuff, if I can, the hat and the sign right there. It's a great back catalog with Ray and Randy and, of course, EDJ on the show. Had a great time. Also got a couple of bottles up here. There you go. Point my finger in the right direction. But anyways, again, if you're still here, I greatly appreciate you. Again, smash that subscribe button for me. We are on the road to trying to hit 500 before the NFL season starts. So at 310 at the moment of recording, we're looking for 190 more. We'll see if we get there. I am hopeful, though, and I will see you in the next episode of Papa Schro Knows Podcast.